What's happening, everybody? I'm Steve, and welcome back to Junkdrummer TV, and welcome to episode 5 of Know Your Role. And I have the honor of having one of my two favorite drum YouTubers on the show today. He's a man who has a fantastic beard as well, and he's a man who also knows how to spell his first name correctly. And if you're watching my channel, we've all seen, this is Stephen Taylor. Thank you very much, sir.
Good. Thank you for having me. It's a privilege. It's high praise. So I appreciate it.
Like I said, and I told you this right before we got on here, when I started mulling over starting a YouTube channel, I'm a drum teacher in real life. I was like, I'll do some drum lessons. And I went and watched you and Rob beat down Brown. I'm like, well, that's taken care of. There's no need for that to be any more channels like that. I have used your video of you playing 100 songs with what I call the AC/DC beat. Like if I tell my students play the AC/DC beat, it's that one. I think it's one of the most valuable videos on YouTube. I have showed that to so many students.
That's one of the reasons why we made it. I will refer to myself as multiple people.
I do the same thing.
I have a group of guys that actually works on this stuff with me now. I did it by myself for a long time, but now it's just too much with the editing and the mixing and all that stuff, especially as ambitious as some of the projects we're trying to do. So Tim Buell works on a lot of the audio mixing and creative elements and editing, and Grant Jenkins works full-time actually with me. And he is our community manager at SDS, my online drum school. And then he also does video editing and thumbnails, and he's learning it all. He came on this past year and he's just been awesome.
But yeah, I think that video, like when you show that student, and I don't know, do you still do like in person one-on-one lessons, or do you do everything through your?
So that was a decision I had to make a few years ago, because it got to where what was needed of me. I carry a really heavy teaching load and student load online. And it got to where I was becoming the more inconsistent person with in-person lessons, and I don't like that. So I just had to stop doing them. Occasionally I'll do one-off lessons when people come through town, or if it's a masterclass type deal, or other professionals, if they come through town and want to hit it, I'll do those. But I'm strictly online now and run that program, doing all of my teaching online. I could, you could juggle doing both, but it's like I kind of am a big stickler for pick what you do and then do that well. So that is what I do.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Like if you are doing like kind of younger kids still, and if I get a younger kid, I can tell that they're getting bored with trying to struggle to get to play that very first groove that we all learn how to play. I'll throw that video on, and I'm like, look here, you're going to play. Like this is only 100 of like 55,000 other songs that you can play with this one groove. It's such a valuable video that I've used many, many times. I did not realize, and I'm trying to think the first time that I saw you, I think it was maybe one of your Bonham videos. We share a love of Bonham. I have a black pit bull that sits right there that's actually named Bonham. Black dog. Get it? And I didn't realize that you have been on. I kind of see you now as like one of the pioneers of like YouTube drum education. Like I did not realize and doing research for this, I found videos back pre-beard.
Oh yeah.
8-9 years ago. Like how long have you been doing this?
So I started the channel around 2009. I had the idea for it earlier than that. But I finished up college. I started playing professionally when I was 15, and then did 3 semesters of college. And I got my first full-time club gig on Bourbon Street in New Orleans at 19. So I moved there and did that for 3 years. I got married while I was there. I've been with my wife since I was 16. She actually saw me at my very first paid gig, which is kind of a funny story.
That's such a beautiful story. I heard that on your Rich Redmond podcast. That's wonderful.
She's great. And so I got back into school around age 22-ish, and then finished up, and then we moved here to Nashville. And I started doing the same thing you always do, getting plugged in, and it was just inconsistent. The work was inconsistent and things were changing. when I was coming up, reading, Modern Drummer and all of that, Drum Magazine, all the session guys, we were talking earlier, I idolized those guys, and coming here, the session world was really changing because of the internet, because recording gear is so much cheaper than it used to be. You can have a home studio. You've got platinum albums that are being cut in, basements, and so things were changing. I was seeing that, and then the road work was different than it had been portrayed. And so I was looking at that and going, well, I don't want the only way I can work is to be gone from my family, because I kind of build my life off of multiple pillars. It's not just music. It's music, and it's faith, and it's family, and it's your money's got to be in there too, income, like creativity. I try to build it off these pillars, and if I'm winning at one but losing at all the others, I call that a loss. So looking at that, I came home from a particularly bad gig, and I just told Kelly, I said, I think I need to quit music and just get a 9 to 5 or something. Which she, immediately got me some pain relievers and a cloth and thought I was maybe running a fever. And I just said, I'm like, mid late 20s, and I'm tired, and I'm too young to be tired. And so I picked up personal training, and she said, well, are you going to get back into music? And I said, I would like to, but if I do, I'll say when I work and how I work and where I work and who I work with and how much I get paid. And I said, I'm going to be in control of that. I said, maybe somebody would want to have lessons online or something. That was really around the time that YouTube was kind of getting kicking, 2006, 2007 time, 2008, and I just told her, I said, maybe, there's this YouTube thing. There was only a couple of drum lessons on there at all, and those were in no way any type of formal thing. It was just guys kind of winging stuff up there.
Expert Village.
Yeah, exactly. Those, and so I did personal training for 6 years. In the meantime, I joined a band for fun, and we wound up getting signed to Universal Records, and so that wound up being I wound up getting back into the music industry that way, which is great group of guys. I'm still best friends with one of them. We were supposed to rehearse tonight for a project we were working on, but he's got softball for his daughter, so that's where we are. And so yeah, I started while I was doing Lovers and Liars, and was kind of going on the road on the weekends with them. I started shooting out of my garage, no AC, no heat. Just I pulled down the garage door rigging and screwed that to the wall, so the outside looked like there was a garage door, but the inside I drywalled that, and that looked like an official studio. So yeah, I started there, and it was probably 2009, I think, when that happened. Did that for a couple of years, and then started in 2011. Started my online drum school, and have been in business since October of 2011 was whenever I opened that. So yeah, I've been doing it a hot minute. I did it for a long time, not knowing at all what I was doing, and just I leave all my videos up just because I like people to see that wherever you see someone today, it's not really where they started. You can look up some of my old videos, and they're really cringy.
Do you ever go back through there?
Oh, I try not to. I try to avoid it. And some of them I have hid, not because I didn't want somebody to see the content, but because they were so awful. They were just so bad that I thought, this just makes me look inherently bad as an individual. Quality is so poor. So, but yeah, I just started with what I had, and started building it from there. So.
It's an impressive thing, and dude, this know your role thing is really turning into me getting to like hang out with people I'm big fans of. You brought up something, and I think that it's not really talked about a lot. Like when you are a musician, and especially when you talk about doing like the road stuff, unfortunately, if you are family oriented, and you want to be there for that softball game for your kid, we have to make a lot of those sacrifices. And I've always talked about it like this, like, I only took gigs that I really, really wanted to do, because if I was going to be away from my partner and my family and my dog, it was going to be to go do something that I really, really loved.
Yeah.
And like, that's really hard for if you're trying to do like that sideman gig, because if you don't know, Steven lives in Nashville. Taking those gigs that maybe you don't really dig artistically, so you're not getting the artistic satisfaction, and then you're away from your family. That's something a lot of people,
Yeah.
they don't talk about that in music school.
Well, and that was one of the problems. I that was one of the things that was really a misconception to me. There's a great documentary on Netflix, if it's still on there, called Hired Guns, and a lot of the guys that I grew up reading about in magazines and stuff, I was like, wait a second, hold on. The tour he's talking about that he just came home from and is painting houses to make ends meet. Wait, that was the tour I was reading about him on. Like, it just wasn't a very fair representation of what it was. And so I never like to paint the music industry as bad. I just like to paint it as real and what it is. My dad traveled a lot when I was a kid. He was a pastor and a evangelist in ministry. He traveled around, and I wished he wouldn't have traveled so much. It would have been
Right.
nice to have him home more. Of course, it's in that realm, it's a calling, it's a passion. And going back to kind of what you were talking about, I kind of forecast is like, okay, well, when I'm in my 70s and my kids are, sitting on the porch with me and we're like talking, and they're saying you've gone a lot, but at least loved the music you were playing. I was like, well,
They don't care.
yeah, like, I'm like having trouble answering my future self. It's like,
Right.
I don't know if I did, so I just kind of took a step back, and that's not downplaying anyone's music. I think everybody should play what they love.
Right.
I just really started taking an honest look at it, and if I got to the end of my career but didn't have my wife or my kids didn't know me, or I've met guys in their mid 50s that have been on the road for years and years and lose a gig, and they're looking at hanging up the sticks because they don't have enough money to make ends meet, and that's great. It's just I wanted to have a little bit more of a balanced life, and I believed that there was a way to do that, to have creativity, to be able to play music, to be able to be in the music industry. I wanted to do all of that. So that took taking a step back as I was talking to more and more guys that were on the road, and a lot of the band members, the road environment. I turned down multiple different tours because of the road environment, and that the atmosphere would be while I was on, and then a lot of the guys I was meeting were single, or they lived a double life, like they had a Rolodex and they rolled through the same towns every year, and Ginny and
Yep.
Susie, and you'll call them up, and I'm not talking bad about anybody. It's just like that's kind of how it was, and I was like, hold on, this just isn't my vibe. And that's not the way it is for everyone. But
Right.
there was, I'll give you, for instance, a few years ago, 3 or 4 maybe, there was a bass player that I played at a gig here in town multiple times. And he played with a very big Christian artist, and had been doing that for like 12 years. And we were talking in the break room, and he's like, man, I'm just tired. He had just lost a relationship with a girl that he really liked her. And the reason that they split up was he was gone all the time. And that one kind of really hit home with him. He's like, I mean, I love all the experiences I've been able to have. He's like, but I don't really have anything to show for it beyond like I've been to all these places. And so he got out of music for that reason. So I don't know. In my 20s, I just kind of started looking at that and going, okay, well, is there a way to do this and love it and like it? And that took me stepping out of it and kind of re-engaging with it. For many years, I didn't talk about that, and a lot of people just assumed I appeared on YouTube and was just some guy that decided to do that. But I started got my first paid gig at 15, and gigged all through high school with stage shows, variety shows, cover bands, original bands, all time big band, all that stuff. Um, then Bourbon Street, like I had a whole, career before my 30s that was just playing, tens of thousands of hours of stage time. And so, I don't know, I felt like I had done that. And it's with every, once you play one festival with 20,000 people, I would find myself going, okay, well, what now? I know I can do that, but what next? Like, is that what I'm going for? I don't know. It's an interesting conversation to have, and
It's
one that I revisit quite often.
man, much respect for, putting that family first. That's we need many more good dads around, if you know what I'm saying. Like
Appreciate
it's something that, like, man, I know cats who were, in bands 25 years ago that were in the biggest, people who know who I'm from know who I'm going to talk about. Who are in one of the biggest country acts of all time, and now are not doing well, because maybe the family was not taken care of as it should be. And it's you're that tightrope walk that we try to walk as musicians. It seems like you have found the perfect balance for everything for you and what you were trying to accomplish.
Oh man. Oh, I don't know if I got the perfect balance, but
I mean, more. Okay, I'll put it like this: you have found that balance. I would say probably better than most musicians.
well, and there to kind of what we're talking about. There's some guys that do both incredibly well. Jim Riley is one that I always look to and very much have respect for with how he has been able to curate his professional life and balance just an incredible family home life. He's always, he's like a cat. He's always landing on his feet. He's always trying to put everything in proper perspective. So, but yeah, I never thought a career would kind of come in the way that it came. When I came up, I didn't want to be a drum teacher. I didn't want to be an elementary band director. I just wasn't a desire of mine.
Did you go to music school?
So yes, I've got a degree in jazz studies. I studied under Dr. John Wooten, Harold
Oh,
Letharge, Henrique de Almeida, who was at faculty at Berkeley past few years, and then Larry Pinella was my jazz director. So yeah, I've done that whole world, and got the degree, and it's worth the paper it's written on, I guess.
yeah,
Um, so
man.
so yeah, but I didn't imagine that I would be in the place where I am doing what I'm doing. But coming up, I mentioned what my father did. I mean, I heard my father speak in public 2 to 3 times a week with gusts of 8 to 9 a week my entire growing up. And to this day, he's one of the best public speakers I've ever heard. He could tell a story that would make a pin drop. I mean, the guy was an incredible public speaker and storyteller. And so, it was almost like I got this kind of training for what I'm doing, presenting on video, which is very much like presenting on stage. I got this training my whole childhood of seeing somebody that was just excellent at doing that. And just sleeping under chairs and pews while he was doing
Right.
having it play in my head while I'm trying to go to sleep. So it's a really great fit for me and what I do. But yeah, I mean it's been wild the past few years to really kind of see the business grow as I've learned more about being a businessman and not just about being a drummer. And then we've got a studio remodel going on right now. It has been ongoing for over a year, and we've ran into some issues with COVID, but we're
Is
two.
R. David R. coming down there to help
He better
with the
come, man.
woodwork?
I keep telling him he better come. He keeps threatening to come. I just feel like if he comes, he's gonna tear up my drums, cut them up or something. I don't know. Me and David, man, we were texting the other day. We're good friends. He's
I
he's a
like that dude a lot. As a woodworker, I'm very because I'm a woodworker on the side as well, and I'm very jealous of his whole setup. He's actually another cat I'm going to try to get on here.
oh yeah,
But
man.
yeah, he'll be like, "Ooh, that's a sweet Tammy you got back there. Let's cut that in half and see what we've got."
He's a good guy, man. I'm hoping to have him down soon. But
Those
yeah, I
videos
mean,
you all did were wonderful. If y'all haven't checked those out, please check out R. David R. and Steven destroying a child's drum set.
yeah, but I've got a whole studio where we're able to work now that is going to be outfitted for making video content, for recording, and I never imagined that I would have my own business, much less own a studio, much less
Be an
get to,
employer.
yeah, much less have people work for me and get to do the things that I get to do and work with the people that I get to work with. I love the guys I work with. And you know, to me, it's just kind of, I have a lot of fun. There's a lot of responsibility. We're in the middle of a website overhaul, and there's a lot of that stuff that's not drum stuff, but to me, it kind of all is part of what we do.
Man, I wanted to go back and you talked about like you had been playing, in bands and stuff and since like 15 and I wanted to visit this because I don't think enough of it is talked about on YouTube for whatever reason. And I have lots of students that start playing in church. Did your career start playing and did your career start playing in church?
Yeah, so it's a very unintentional start. I picked up the drums at 14. I got my first drum set, and a couple weeks after I got the drum set, a man, Joseph Britton, who wound up being, he's like a second father to me. He came up to me, he was the music minister at that church, and he said, "Hey, your mom said you play the drums." And I said, "No, correction, I have a drum set. I don't play the drums, but maybe I can at some point." And he said, "Well, my drummer just left. Like, he took the drums, he's gone." He said, "So I need a drummer this weekend." And I said, "I don't think you really want me to do that." And so he said, "No, it's going to be great. You can just watch my hands, and we'll get by." He's a piano player. Turns out Joseph was an incredible, not only musician, but an incredible composer and an incredible. I mean, he regularly composed for Mississippi Symphony Orchestra, for Mobile Symphony Orchestra. Like, he was running stage shows and all that stuff, and I fell in with this guy, and he just really took a liking to me. And so that weekend, I played 3 different times in front of people: a men's breakfast, a youth service, and an actual church service. And that started years of me playing 3 to 4 times a week in front of people, with the rehearsals attached to that, with for where I was the number one guy that I could have been with, and he got me hooked up with Henrique de Almeida, who was getting his graduates, his master's at that time under Dr. John Wooten. And, our first lesson, he said, "I don't take high school students, so you better work hard or I'm going to fire you." And I'm like, okay,
The
like,
teacher's going to fire the student.
yeah. So I came in every week, like, knowing everything, and I was so scared of getting fired as a student. And he laughs about it now. He said, "You always came in knowing everything." And so I by the time I got out of high school, I had thousands of hours of stage time, coupled with thousands of hours of rehearsal time. Because by age 15, I started getting hired by Joseph to do stage shows, because he did a lot of stage shows, and that was kind of my introduction, was pit drumming.
Mhm.
And you have to be very precise, and
I've done them.
and so that was my introduction to all that. And I was really just fortunate to be mentored by Joseph, and to come into contact with Henrique and my next drum teacher, Jeff Mills, who was responsible for getting my first full-time gig in New Orleans. He had gone to play with John Wayne. The Famous Door is an old jazz club on the corner of Conti and Bourbon Street, and he got the gig from Raymond Weber. Raymond Weber was the drummer on Star Turtle and Harry Connick Jr. Star Turtle She album. He played with, I think he played with Jewel. I think he played with Dave Matthews on his solo stuff. Like, he was one of the guys in New Orleans, and Jeff got the gig from him. And then 6 months later, he messaged me and said, "Hey," or he emailed me, and he said, "Hey man, they're starting a day band. I think you could do it." And so I came down and auditioned, and somehow got the part.
Was
And
that a jazz gig, or was that like a new
no,
second line thing?
New Orleans is a real unique place, because you have a lot of the local, like you kind of mentioned, the second line, kind of the local scene. And then you also have this Snug Harbor scene, which ties into the local scene. And Snug Harbor is the area where they do all of the jazz. So you can go see big bands, you can go see small group jazz, and then there's Bourbon Street, and I was on Bourbon Street, which is going to be top 40. So I was playing, Casey and the Sunshine Band, Huey Lewis and the News, Chicago, Earth, Wind and Fire, and then I got in other groups that each group exposed me to a different genre. Then I got in that first group had horns, so we did a ton of Motown stuff and a lot of the disco stuff, and then I got into another group that was actually a R&B / go-go band out of DC.
That's my stuff right there.
Yeah, Jacques, he was Michel Ndegocello's brother. He was the guitar player for that band, and they were great. So I learned all about go-go music, and then my next gig was at Bourbon Street Blues Company, and that was more classic rock. So
Right.
Zeppelin and AC/DC, but with each one of them, I showed up for my first gig with these guys. There was no rehearsal, and they gave me this set list of like 50 something songs. And he said, "What do you know?" And I knew like Brick House and Funky Music and the two that I had auditioned with,
Right.
And I said those, and he's like, "What do you listen to?" And I said, "Well, not, I'm 19. I listen to punk rock. I don't listen to this. This is old people's music." And but it with every band, I got the opportunity to really dive into some really important times in music and understand Motown and get Motown's Greatest Hits, which is like, a 5 or 6 disc anthology, and just, dig into why was that such an important period? Why was what's the difference between Tower of Power funk and Parliament funk versus James Brown? Like, can you come up with the differences between that? What's the difference between Motown and what was going on in California at the time with the Beach Boys and all that stuff? Like, there's so many versus what was going on in Muscle Shoals at that time as well. Like, there's these 3 different camps in the U.S. that were going on around the same time. It's real interesting to me to be able to dive into that stuff and get the opportunity to study that music.
Al Jackson Jr. is one of the most criminally underrated drummers that nobody talks about, and it runs me crazy. I'm going to do a vid. I got to find. It's going to be really hard to find like an old, like a live video where you see a lot of Al Jackson. I think that he's just like I've kind of taken upon myself to kind of like be that one little person on YouTube that hopefully elevates people that don't get the love. Like, man, Al Jackson Jr. does, everybody talks about the Motown drummers like Pistol and that bunch, but man, nobody talks about him enough. And if you don't know, Al Jackson Jr. is the Stax, the Memphis drummer. He's the guy that was in Booker T and the MGs and played on all the Al Green stuff and more stuff that I'm sure can't think of right now. But he is criminally underrated.
Oh, and you have all the drummers that are down in the New Orleans scene as well that were playing on Fats Domino's stuff, and there's a whole scene down there that is it's just incredible as well. So I'm huge as a teacher. I'm really, really big on looking back and understanding where things came from. I was listening to actually a Lizzo song. Was it yesterday, the day before? And I stopped the song and I'm like, man, those drum fills and that drum groove is really reminiscent of this area of 70s funk. And it's really, I'm driving in my truck by myself, mind you, and I'm talking out loud to myself. And I'm like, that's really reminiscent of, man, what is that? Love Roller Coaster, not the Chili Peppers version, but the, Ohio Players version. So then I'm like pulled over on the side of the road, looking up on Spotify and YouTube. And I'm like, hold on. Let me, like, is this, it's actually almost the same BPM. And then I'm like, I got to get home.
It's a sickness. It's a sickness.
Yeah, you can't pull over on the way home from the studio just to listen to Ohio Players and be like, sorry, I'm, 45 minutes late, hon. I was listening to Love Roller Coaster by, the Ohio Players. But yeah, I really hear current music and I have a big appreciation for it. But I also love to hear what's happening. And I love Lizzo because she uses a lot of horns. She's her orchestration's great. Her lyrical delivery is great. Anderson .Paak is another one that does a great job.
I love him.
And they throw homage to what came before them. It makes their music better. And so I'm big on listening and going, reggaeton. Yes, that's the beat that's used in reggaeton, but do you know where it came from before that? Let's go back to Trinidad and Tobago and we can look at steel drums. Let's talk about what happened there, And so, because that beat was for me taught as a soca, right? Well before reggaeton came along.
Right.
So I'm real big on learning through listening to the music and then not just listening to it, but tracing its roots. There was a cat and we were listening to music together. He was playing with a current country artist, a real young country artist. And, we started talking about Willie Nelson and I started going back to some old Willie Nelson songs. I was like, wait a second, you got to hear this live version. I'm like pulling up these live versions of these songs, these old country cats,
What's his drummer's name? Paul?
Oh, I forget.
Crap. He's been with him since the beginning.
Yeah, he's been you and the song I was looking up was You Were Always on My Mind.
Right.
And it's just this slow country ballad and the guy's sitting there like, okay, what does this have to do with anything? I'm like, dude, if you don't know Willie Nelson, You Were Always on My Mind, then how can you go out and play with, and he's like, well, his guitar playing's kind of out of time. I'm like, this is a staple of Willie. Yes. Guys learn to play out of time just so they can play like Willie's bad playing. Like,
yep. So dude, you're such a drum teacher. Where I live, I'm kind of the only drum teacher in town. I'm so glad to get to hang out with a drum teacher. I never get to hang out with him.
Well, people honestly think I overreact on my videos when I'm reacting to stuff that's happening. Like if we're doing I've done several videos where hiring Fiverr people and hiring session players, and I did a video where I showcased some younger kid drummers who were just amazing. And people are like, yeah, it would be better if you didn't overreact. And I'm like, well, it'd be better if you got more excited about
Yeah.
what you're doing here. Like, I bet you're really lame at a concert. You go there, you're the guy that just sits there and the band hates because you're like eating popcorn and, raising scorecards like 9.5, 5.7, with every song. Like, you're the guy that the band's like, could we just get security to get that guy out? He's bringing
This
the
guy's
party.
having no fun here.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you go to a concert and freak out. Why in the world would you not freak out with? I don't know. Maybe I had weird listening parties with my friends. Like we would hoot and holler and shout and run around whenever good stuff was played. And oh, you gotta hear this song. It's like wait for this one. You hear that bass drum? Boom, boom. It's so good. It's just like an eighth note.
That's
I don't know.
That's that southern soul, Stephen.
Yeah, I don't think people get. I don't think people get
I've
excited
seen
enough.
those comments on your videos because I love those Fiverr videos. Here's a quick story. So my guitar player in this metal band that I play with, he, parallel thinking. He texted me. He's like, "Dude, you should do the Fiverr thing." And I was like, "That's a great idea." I was like, "Let's make sure no one else has done it." I was like, "Damn it, Steven's already done it." I saw those videos and I saw some of those comments. I was like, "This guy's not working. Like, this guy really
Yeah,
is this fired up about it." Like,
yeah.
I know,
No,
I know pro wrestling, and this guy's not faking.
I love music, and myself and the guys I work with on these videos. I'm really trying to come up with different ways to teach, and it really is going back to more organic ways that I came up learning music, and that was through music. It was through listening, it was through creating music, it was through hearing feedback from other musicians when I played. And I think that's a art that is becoming unfortunately lost on a lot of younger players. When I was coming up, and it wasn't even as bad for me, but it's called the cut. Like, on every gig you had those older cats that were going to be cutting on you, and that it was a good thing. It was a good thing to have those guys mentoring. And I look back, there was one in particular I've talked about before. His name was Bobby O, if you're listening, I appreciate all of the rough punches to the mouth that you delivered with the music. Yeah, I mean, those are some of my most formative and informative times. And some of those times where at the time it felt very, very abrasive, the way that they were coming and reacting to me. But it was needed because, as Joseph would say, he said, music is very much like you're flying a plane. And he's like, and you're fine. Everything's going great. It's blue skies. And he said, and all of a sudden you're in the trees and the plane's just popping around. He said, and you got to pull out of the trees, because if you don't pull out of the trees, the whole thing's going to take a nosedive. And so he would, be very adamant in the middle of a song, banging on the keyboard, power whispering, as I call it, like, you hear where the beat is. And I'm like, I'm 14. I don't know. And
This is
so,
but real quick, this is a concept I actually talked about with Will Hunt from Evanescence in my last interview. That kind of, how would you put it? That apprentice, master apprentice thing that I went through too in my Uncle Mike's country bands when I was in college. Like, because when you talk about those old cats, it's like looking at you, being like, dude, that's gone. And I think we're seeing that, not to sound like the old man and get off my lawn. I think we're seeing that a little bit in our music, because we're getting better players than we've ever seen. Like some of these cats that are like 18, 19, like JD Beck and cats like that. Dude, that kid made me want to stop playing.
yeah,
But we're not getting that go play with a bunch of cats that are older than you, do that cover gig, learn that tradition, but then also have a guy being like, dude, this ain't working and you need to work harder. We're not getting that
yeah,
anymore.
I joke that I learn best through bloody lips, figuratively. I learn best if I get punched in the mouth and then I'm like, whoa, what went wrong there, and how can I not do that again? So that, and there's so many times of screwing up on stage. Those were the quickest lessons you learn. And that's what's so great about them, is that it's a lesson that's learned in the moment very quickly, and you never forget it.
Mhm.
You never forget that you dropped 2 beats and turned the beat around when the horn players tried to go to do a samba, and then the guitar player turned around and screamed at you and kicked his amp. And just at that time, Raymond Weber had walked into the club and he heard the whole thing, and you were the reason for like that. Like you never forget that. At that point in time, in your mind, you're like, oh crap. So transitions are super important. I gotta learn how to transition between 2 beats because if I don't, I'm gonna crash the band in front of someone. Like there was another one with Bobby O that I've spoken about before. We came back. Our weekend was like a Monday and Tuesday or something like that. It was kind of the days we were off, and we came back and we played the first song. And Bobby O turned around the horns. There were 3 of them: Scott Frock, Bobby O. No, there were 2: Scott Frock and Bobby O. Scott Frock is fantastic horn player. He's still in New Orleans, and Bobby O turned around. No, we had 3. Jay Webb was with us, and he turned around and he said, "You didn't practice this weekend, did you?" And I just kind of looked at him and I'm like, first of all, like, who is this guy?
And
Who,
how old are
you
you at
know,
this time?
I was 19. I was 19.
Okay, okay.
First of all, like, who is this saxophone player to turn around and tell me I didn't practice? Number 2, how does he know I didn't practice? Like I'm equally offended and also shocked that I'm found out. I just sat there for a second, then I just kind of shook my head no, and he just 3 words, I can tell, and then he turned around,
Oh.
nothing else. So I had to play a 4-hour gig with 5-hour gig with this guy. With second song, he turned around and I was supposed to count the next song off, and I'm like, oh man, that was awful. That was, and you got to play the whole gig, and it's like I've never forgotten that feeling. And so going into a rehearsal gives me like PTS, of this like, oh, you got to practice, you got to have it together because you don't want to wing it, you don't want Bobby O like figuratively in your mind turning around being like, I can tell you didn't practice.
Dude, I call it the fear.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
I have a new student, right? Well, not a new, but a student who now has made it to the kids group, the Wednesday night group, right? And he's really good. Brody, go practice. But he just didn't practice enough. He was that kid. Those students that like have talent and they don't practice because they have talent and they get by with it until they get a list from the church from the choir master.
yeah.
And Brody, I remember his first lesson back, like when he got that gig, or again, I guess you call it getting the gig. And he was like, I've got these 3. So, I'm like, this is what I've been talking about. You have the fear now
Yeah.
of public failure because you have to go on Wednesday and play this for all your peers and such. That's the stuff when if you're going to be a musician or not. Because if you don't stand up to that fear and if you wilt, you might as well keep it in the case.
Well, and there's, I almost lost my gig in New Orleans. My Jeff Mills, who was the drum teacher that got me the gig, he played opposite me in the night band, so I would get to play and then get off, and I could hang around for a few minutes before they kind of raised. I really wasn't supposed to be in the club after I was working because I was underage.
Right.
And he came by my apartment. He said, hey man, you're about to lose your gig. And I said, well, why? And he said, you can't make people dance, and it's a dance club. He said, you don't have any groove. Which is like, looking back, that's like just the death blow of just every drummer. Like you have no groove, just punch in the mouth. He goes down on the ring, 3 count, he's out. And I was like, well, how do I get that? And he's like, I don't know, man, you just got to get it. But if you don't, you're going to lose your gig. And it sent me into a tailspin because they were going to put me on percussion. And so, yeah, I just went into overdrive, and that's whenever you've listened to a song, when you've listened to a specific song and you know that the bass drum has a very slight bounce while the rest of the groove maintains its consistency, and why does that make it feel that way? I was digging into, that was the only way I could think. I thought, okay, I'm going to watch Zorro's Commandments of R&B Drumming because he knew something, and Commandments of Funk Drumming because he probably knows something there. And then I was digging into songs like Brick House and Funky Music. As cheesy as that sounds to some people, there's a reason why every, danceable, disabled person will move to funky music. to
Yep.
Brick House. There's a reason for that, you know? And so when you really dive in and you try to play your hi-hat exactly like they're playing it, nothing else on the kit, just the hi-hat. Can I get it just like he's playing? Can I play the bass drum just like he's playing it? You know, to have, I've mentioned Raymond a couple times. He wouldn't remember me from Adam, but he was just being in the same room with him, I would just listen and he explained Brick House. He's like, Brick House, you can't just be sitting here playing. He's like, Brick House is about a fine, big woman. She's walking down the street. He's like, how do you feel when you see her? And I'm like, I don't know, Raymond. I'm like, I don't know how I feel. And he's like, you got to think about that, and then you got to play that. And I'm like, like there's pistons blowing in my head. I'm like, this is too much. I don't understand it.
They didn't talk like this in music school.
Nobody told me that I needed to think about large women walking down the street. But I got it after a while, and I would go into the club every day, and I would watch people with these songs I've been working on. And when I started getting a couple of people to be able to tap their foot, and then I got a couple of people up on the dance floor in the afternoon, I was like, I think maybe I got groove. Like, what's that movie, Stella? How Stella got her groove back?
Right.
It's like a really lame version of that without any of the romance. It's just this guy on Bourbon Street. They can't make people dance. It's just really hot and sweaty, and it's just like
in a town that you dance as soon as you get off the airport.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm the one guy holding the whole town back. There's this one guy at this club. He sucks. Don't go in there.
Dude, you gave me a flashback of a very similar situation that happened to me, and this goes back to that loss of gigs and goodness. If we want to talk about playing situations being destroyed with obvious situations, there's going to be even less places to ply your trade. I was playing in like a blues southern rock band in college, and I was in the jazz band and in the 1 o'clock ensemble, and I thought I had my shit together, and I thought I was the man. And this dude, he was very much like a Warren Haynes type. Even kind of looked like Warren Haynes, just that kind of blues slinging guitar player type. And he knew me through my family, so I'm a junior, so everybody calls me Stevie. And he just came to me one night and he was just like, Stevie, your time is terrible. He's like, it ain't working. And he's like, I'm going to send you back to your uncle, because I'd been playing him Uncle Mike's band. And he's like, okay, you've now graduated to this guy's band. Dave, thank you. Because he saved me. He gave me, and this was been mid 90s. I was in college from 95 to 2000. He gave me a Memorex cassette tape that he had recorded two, 3, 4 minutes at a time, different tempo settings. And it varied. So he was like, go home and play everything to this tape. And I would put that tape on, and it would start at 120 for 4 minutes, and it'd go to 80 for 4 minutes. And, now you just, get a metronome app on your phone.
Yeah.
And I had that same thing. I was like, man, Dave's going to fire me. And I just went home and, probably didn't do my homework like I should have at college, and was just playing to that practice tape. And eventually my time wasn't, this is such old musician guys. Like, well, that wasn't terrible. Okay, I've gotten to not terrible.
Bobbio said that to me after, was it 4 months? We were getting our tips in the back, and he came by, and he just looked at me and he said, it wasn't awful tonight. And then he walked out, and I was like, yes, that wasn't awful. Bobbio gave me a slappy, backhanded comment, but at least it was better than you didn't practice.
Yeah, no doubt. I've actually told Dave, I was like, I probably owe you some money for the gigs that I have gotten through your sometimes very, very harsh looks. He was a look guy. He would, you do something maybe too busy. And, I was in jazz and I was in music school, so everything we played was too busy. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And if I'm playing One Way Out by Allman Brothers and I'm trying to be Tony Williams, and he give you that look, those looks. And I think that's something that's maybe missing from our people who are making our new music, is they haven't had a guy to give them a look.
Yeah. And I think a lot of teachers hesitate everything is so politically correct these days. There is a way to mentor and encourage players, whether they be younger or older, while also kind of like, you know, pulling them beside you and be like, and then also give them a good shot in the arm, just like a good punch. Like, come on, man, like get it together. But also, I really like you. You're great, but if you don't get it together, I'm gonna punch you again. Seriously.
That's dude, you're
Now, there's,
preaching. You're preaching right now. I
there's,
think it's very important, especially as you said in our PC days. I have told parents that like I've told them like to let them know up front, I'm not old school. I'm not going to wrap you with a on over the knuckles over with a ruler, but I've told parents like I will be the one adult in this kid's life that will not care about hurting their feelings because I care. You know what I
yeah,
mean? I'm trying to, I don't teach because it pays my bills. Obviously, I do, but I really love doing it. I love it. And I want these kids to be great. So when I see like the kid Brody that I was talking about earlier, and he comes back from his Wednesday gig and he's just like, it went great. Everything was like, dude, I get as much of a high off that as I do recording a great track in the studio.
yeah, yeah. I think it's a definite art to be able to encourage and love on people, and all, while at the same time really giving them a firm line to mentor to. And as a teacher, I'm also very big because a lot of my students are hobbyists. They're very good in other fields and other professions, and so a lot of it for me is I have a questionnaire that they'll fill out, and one of the first things I'm asking is, why are you playing the drums? What is the purpose of you playing the drums? If the purpose is that you want to do this full time for a living, there's a different Stephen you're going to come in contact with
Yeah.
whenever we have meetings. If the purpose is for you because you're a heart surgeon and you just want to come home and relax after you've done heart surgery and saved people, like, this is a different thing. I'm going to approach this and I'm going to make sure you're keeping music in the space that you want music to be in. And if you get too stressed out and too, I'm going to be like, hey, this is good, I want you to keep pushing yourself, but it's getting away from the core why you're learning. Why don't you play some songs this week? Why don't we focus on that and get back to the core of why you're actually playing this instrument, which is you have enough stress at work. You're supposed to be having fun. We'll learn some stuff, but also fun. So for me as a teacher, it's really, really important to understand why are you learning it, to understand what age you are. That's such a huge thing. Young kids are very different animal to teach
Oh yeah.
than teenagers versus fully formed adults. It's just they're very in very different spaces in life. So yeah, I think teaching is an art, and I learn just as much from my students as I do from any book I've ever read.
I've got like a core of like 100 songs that I try to kind of get my students to go through, and maybe 80 of them are songs that I've picked up from students who wanted to learn them, and be like, oh well, there's this like a perfect example is Uptown Funk. Like a kid wanted to play Uptown Funk, and I was like, oh, this is a song that I would transfer to a lot of my other students, so they end up. I learned like we said, I learned a lot from my students, and it's easier to keep up with what's cool and what's going on right now. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know who the 21 Pilots were really until I
Yeah.
had a student come and wanted to learn all their songs. You were saying earlier, God, this is so much fun to talk to a drum teacher. Oh my goodness. When you were talking about like, I get those same students who are the hobbyists, right? Have you ever found, especially like if there's such a success in their real life, that they end up putting all this pressure on themselves to be. I had this going on last night with a very successful, I think he has a consultant job, and like he was just like, and I had to tell him, I was like, dude, you're not going in the studio tomorrow. You don't have a civic center gig to play this weekend. Like, you have to sometimes remind them that like just because you're wonderful at your regular job, you're not going to have that same excellence that comes over here to the drum set.
And I love people striving for it, but it really is about keeping that in check. And I can kind of look back at my personal training time. I did that for about 6 or 7 years, and I was pulling 50, 55 sessions a week. I was doing a lot of training with people, and what I found was you really needed to understand why was that person there? There were some trainers that would just, they were going to do their thing with whatever person walked through the door. If you were 70, you were going to go through their thing. If you were 10, you were going through their thing. If you needed to lose 100 pounds, you're going through their thing. If you wanted to bulk up 10 pounds in muscle, you're going through their, but it's the same thing for everybody. Like it's, they only, and for me, I really wanted to understand, I had a younger lady come to me. She said, well, I want to lose weight. She said, but I'm really strong. So a lot of trainers will automatically start throwing heavy weight on me and I don't lose weight. And I said, no, I'm not going to throw any weight on you. I was like, you're going to, and sure enough, we started dropping weight because I really wanted to focus on why she was there. I had a lot of, believe it or not, older population, elderly, that came, and that training at once you get to your 70s and 80s, that's a different training. You're not looking to out bench press the other 80-year-old guy
Right.
on the front porch with you. Like you're going for functionality, you're going for balance. You want to be able to, small things like I want to be able to wash my hair and raise my hands above my head in the shower and not lose my balance. These were the things that I was dealing with. Or I just want to maintain my everyday functional level. And so I found that I would make them very, very frustrated if I started pushing too heavy of weights or kind of my own agenda on them. But if I kept it in the realm of where they liked it, they never missed a session. And as long as I always came back to, okay, you said these were your goals. Are we hitting those? Yeah, I'm happy. Okay, let's keep going. And for some people, I did the same thing with them for years. But that was what they wanted. They were looking to maintain their current level of activity, and doing those exercises push them just enough without stressing them out, and it's the same way with drum students. We really have to understand why they're there. And then I'm also a huge proponent of letting the music lead people. My wife and I talked about this a lot. We have 3 kids: Jackson, Carter, and Brooklyn.
How many
And
drummers you got?
Jackson plays the drums. He just turned 13. He's playing it with his middle school worship team. And Carter's played around with the bass guitar. He says he wants to learn guitar, but he's 10, so he wants to do everything.
It can go either way, yeah.
I think it's great. But she said, you're going to require them to learn an instrument. And I said, no, I don't think that's going to happen. And she said, well, I want them to know about the arts. I said, well, we can know about the arts without requiring them to, be an indentured servant to a, instrument for so long. And so the way I did that, I said, they call it playing music. And so the way we're going to get them into music, or to get them to at least appreciate it, is I'm going to get in the dirt with them. We're going to listen to music. And so we would be wherever we were driving. They liked me because I would turn the radio up to 35 and mom wouldn't turn it down 30, but dad would crank it to 35. And we're like rolling the windows down, like heads out, like, yelling and screaming and enjoying music. And I'd be like, wait, what's that band you were listening to the other day? That was how we'd put that on. And I'm, yelling whatever song it is that they like, and then exposing them to older stuff. And that was how, a buddy of his picked up guitar, and, he said, well, I kind of want to be in a band. And I said, well, you need to know how to play an instrument. And he said, oh, it was kind of like it clicked. He's like, oh yeah, the music thing. I do need to know how to play an instrument. So that's whenever he was like, well, I'll do the drums. And so, but I let the music lead them to that. I didn't want to push that on them. I wanted to show them that the way my music history professor showed me that in college. He was crazy. He's so crazy. He's such a great teacher. And music history was looking to be as fun as college algebra was for me, which was not fun at all. And
Dude, dropping the needle and having to tell what era it was from, and dude,
we started with Gregorian chant. It wasn't even sheet music; it was just blocks. It was like guys that put rocks on pages or something. And I was so not looking forward to it. I had this big, thick The Norton anthology series, like 6 discs, and so I go in there, and this guy was crazy. He was nuts. His dad brought him up like yelling Bach and Chopin and Beethoven, like out the window, going 70 down the highway, like, like singing like that. And so this guy was just so crazy intense about, do you hear the violins there? And he would grab a violin and he'd start playing. He's like, do you hear what the flutes are doing? And I'm like, this guy is crazy. And he was a great teacher. And he led me to classical music and a huge appreciation to classical music, not by making me do assignments, but by showing a passion and an enthusiasm for the music, so much so that I was like, okay, well, maybe the violin is doing something cool. I don't know, like what's it doing? Like it's this guy's freaking out so much. Maybe it is kind of cool. I don't know. I mean, well, I guess it was okay, but you know, but I don't know. I think that music will lead people to musical instruments quicker than anything for me.
I wanted to double back a little bit. Were you training before you started drum teaching?
Training what?
The training,
Personal training?
personal training, yeah.
Yes. Yes. So
And what I was going to ask is like, how much did that help you when you started drum teaching? Obviously, when you started drum teaching, you'd already taken 1,000 lessons and kind of had an idea there. But that's a very unique situation. Did your personal training inspire your teaching of drums in any way?
there are a lot of direct correlations between a hour long training session with someone and a drum lesson. One of the big things I took away from personal training was you were there for accountability. You were there because they had an area of their life that they wanted to work on. They didn't know how to work on it, so they hired you. They didn't want to come in and you asked them what they wanted to do. They wanted to come in with you handing them something and going, "This is what we're doing together. Let's start warming up." Like it was a bam, bam, and then you kept them accountable to that. You were there to measure weight. You were there to measure body fat. Like you were there to encourage them on days where they weren't feeling like it. Some days I was just as much a cheerleader as I was a personal trainer. I had one lady, I knew I could not weigh her at the end of the session because she would leave and she would be depressed about the weight. She was very heavy. And so I learned, like, okay, she's not like the other people. We weigh at the front of it, and then I'd spend the entire session like building her back up. And by the time she got done, she'd done challenging things and she would leave energized instead of leave on a low of, oh, I still haven't hit my goal, still having problems losing weight, that kind of a thing. And so it informed a lot of because it's still teaching, it's still coaching. If you coach basketball or you coach football or you coach swimming or you coach drums or there's a lot of correlates of just good solid teaching foundations and how the brain works. And if we can start to learn those things, teaching anything becomes a lot easier in the long run. My wife's a teacher as well. She's has a degree in elementary education, although she's stayed at home with the kids for, I don't know, a long time, 10 years, 11 years. So she homeschools all of them now.
So does that mean you're the music teacher?
Yeah, I mean, Jackson, I actually have somebody that does drum lessons with him. I don't want to be the
I was going to ask, because like, do you give your son drum lessons?
No, we tried it, and it was more. It's like the old high school, like it's me, it's not you. It was like a me thing. I didn't want to be. We kind of went from that realm of me just having so much fun hanging out and listening to music to.
You didn't want to turn into coach guy.
Yeah, did you practice? Are you doing it? And so I outsourced that. And,
like I know if you practice or not because I live with you, so you can't lie to me.
Exactly. And so now I'm the guy that helps him with set lists for his band at church.
Nice.
They're not extremely good about getting those to them very much ahead of time at all. And so, whenever it comes to the crunch time, 2 days before, we get in there and we hash it out. I go with him to rehearsal and I will, get his ears set. I'll get his throne set, make sure he's comfortable. And then I'm like, all right, dude, it's yours, I'm out. And then I'll just leave the building and let him kind of go through the rehearsal. And then I kind of peek back in between rehearsal and the service. And I'm like, all right, how's everything going? And the first one, he went through the rehearsal and it was his first time to play in front of people. And he was nervous as he would be. And he came out and he was, they had given him a snack or something. And he said, hey, and he kind of pulled me over to the corner and he starts kind of getting the, I'm 13 and I don't want to cry, but I'm kind of probably maybe almost may cry here. And it's like, his buddies are around and I'm like, okay, we can't let this go, So I was just like, hey, what's up, dude? And he's like, gosh, they want me to do this thing. I can't do this thing. I want me to do this thing on the bridge, but I didn't practice that. And I don't know when it's coming. And I was like, dude, it's no problem. You know what you do? He's like, what? And I was like, just keep playing. He's like, the same thing? Yeah, the same thing. Just don't change? No, don't change. But they'll know. Nobody's going to know. Like, they're not going to know. I said, they'll know if you stop. I said,
Yeah.
but if you just keep playing, it just sounds like Jackson knows what he's doing. It's like that, in Finding Nemo, just keep swimming. And
Yep.
I was like, dude, if you just keep playing, nobody will know. And sure enough, he's like, dude, Shmutaj kept playing through it and it was fine. I was like, see, I told you.
Your dad's in the business.
Yeah, exactly. So, I try to be that guy that for him, and have fun with it, and instead of just being the heavy all the time. And yeah,
But also, you're so fired up about having a son that plays drums, right?
yeah. I mean, well, I don't know. I'm fired up for. I really don't care if they play music. What I want them to do is find something that they're passionate about, and if they can find something that they're passionate about and that clicks with them, as long as it's legal, then I'm on board. Like I will go to as many, chess competitions as you want. Like, we just started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and they're just all into it, especially Jackson. They're just like, oh, my 3-year-old's going to start classes today. And they're
Are
just,
you
and it's
being
like,
attacked now at all times at the house?
yeah, it can get rough trying to come home from work sometimes. You get a headlock. They're like, let me show you the new move. It's like, okay, man. And so, but that's really my thing. And I think that's my wife and I talk a lot about this is I just want to help them find their passion. And if their passion is music, that's great. My other son, Carter, he is excellent at building Legos, and that type of a thing. And so, maybe building is his passion. Maybe, I don't know. I just know that whatever that is that they're passionate about, I want to support that. And, it's fun that he plays drums, but we also had a talk a couple weeks ago and I just, I told him, I said, dude, you don't have to play drums for me. If you don't want to play drums, you don't have to play the drums, just so you know. I will be equally as excited if you pick up the flute or if you don't want to do any of that and you come up with, some really cool new way to climb trees and make that an art form. I really don't care. Like, I'll just support you with whatever you do. So for me, that's my biggest thing is kind of helping them find their passion. And once they found that, then doubling down and really supporting them through that. I don't know. But yeah, it's fun that he plays drums. It's definitely fun to have another person I can talk music with.
There's a lot of people that's going to watch this. It's going to say they wish Steven Taylor was their dad.
I don't know. Probably.
I'm telling you for a fact that's going to be a thing.
I'm not as cool as you still have to pull out the dad chops every now and then. So.
Yeah. Well, there's that too.
Still got to sling fire with the vegetables and get in bed on time and scream.
So here's something we haven't addressed, and maybe you probably haven't been as affected as anyone else I've had on the channel because I've had this program because I started this right around the pandemic. Has the pandemic affected your business at all?
Yes, we've grown.
Oh.
But we were growing before that.
But then it really, really grew.
We use it, whenever it first happened. We're a small team. And whenever it first happened, obviously, a lot of my friends in the industry are quitting, moving. It's been really bad on the internet.
People don't realize how bad Nashville's been hit.
Yeah. And I've got a lot of friends that are moving. They're just quitting altogether. So for me, I've seen 2 downturns in my career before this. The first one was 9/11, whenever the towers went down. And that doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you're living in a large city, and we had a World Trade Center in New Orleans, tourism goes to nothing. And so tourism for 3 or 4 months no one was coming anywhere. And the bands got cut to 20%. Was it 20% of the alcohol sales for the club? Which if you're the day band, like I was, you don't have a lot of window shoppers that are just like, 8-hour drinking binges while they're going to, Kohl's and picking up some pants or whatever. You just didn't have, my pay got cut less than in half. So I started picking up doubles. I was playing from 12 to 4 and then from 4:30 until 9:30 at night to make less than I was making before that. Again, another good growth time, but this was when I was engaged and we were getting ready to get married. So I also had to pick up working at a cheesecake bistro there. I'd worked in kitchens in high school. And then I also picked up 2 days a week of landscaping. So I was doing all 3 of those at the same time because I was getting married. And So that was my first downturn that I saw, and then things kind of went back to normal. The second one was Katrina, and
Mm.
that hit a few years after
Oh,
that.
were you down there when it hit?
So I had moved from New Orleans the year before, but Katrina actually came up through Mississippi. It was the outer bands that hit New Orleans, and it really knocked the levees down, and they flooded. Was a lot. Mississippi and that coastal region got the brunt of what was happening as far as the storm itself, and so 80% of the state was without power. We didn't have power for over 2 weeks. And so I was at that time back in college, and I was gigging in New Orleans on the coast, on the Gulf Coast. I was gigging over in Alabama, and all of those places just got devastated by Katrina. The coast, they didn't talk a lot about the Mississippi Gulf Coast. There used to be these beautiful plantation homes that were down there, and all the casinos floated there. I played at all those casinos down there, and you could just drive the beachfront, and there was nothing but slabs where these hundreds of years of old plantation homes had just been. They were just gone. Like they weren't. There was nothing. It wasn't like, oh, we'll salvage what's left of the Beau Rivage of this plantation. It's like, I don't know where it is. It's in the ocean somewhere.
Wow.
And so uh, when all of that happened, I remember going into the kitchen and throwing my calendar in the trash. Everything got wiped for months. So this is the third downturn in the entertainment industry that I've gone through, and this one I managed not to. Not to like
You got
this
to
one
keep your
was like,
schedule.
yeah, it only took three completely great wipeouts for me to finally, but when it happened, I told the guys I work with, I said, look, this can either be a negative thing and we can sit around talking about how this sucks, or we can make this one of the most positive times that we've had for the business. And we just kind of dedicated to figuring out how we could serve the students better, how we could serve members better. We had people coming in trying to cancel, saying that, I lost my job. I don't know when I'm going to get it back. And, multiple times we were kicking back saying, look, here's 6 months on us. Hit us back. Let's see where you are then. But I definitely don't want you to lose speed with drumming. So just stay in the program. Let's get you through that. There was, we were able to drop churn. Churn is the number of new students you get versus the number of students that you lose. And you have an average churn every month with this type of a thing. We were able to drop that 2 percentage points, which doesn't seem like a lot, but once you get down to where as small of a churn as ours was, all of a sudden those numbers start to be like, oh, that's like 40, 50, 60, 100 students a month we're not losing, and
That's
we can,
significant.
yeah, it's very significant, and we can directly relate that back to in March when things started going and we started doing some very specific things in the membership with the experience in the program. And yeah, so we have continued to grow. We've continued to do well while at the same time continued to give as much as we could and continued to, um, you know, be as empathetic as we could with people that were going through some just really hard times. So for some people it's just really hard times, and the last thing I wanted them to do was stop a hobby. So I think that we can take times like that in our life, and they can either break us or make us. And for anybody that's been devastated like this in their industry, whatever that may be, I think it's a time where you can look and go, okay, you know what, this sucks. It happened. How can I come out better and stronger than I was before, and not have this happen again? So yeah, it's been very hard for me to watch a lot of my friends go without work. I've tried to have more projects that other musicians can work on over the past year. The Fiverr stuff is a great example because we don't just have the drummers we've hired from Fiverr. We have people that produce sheet music for that. I've got someone that had to write and record the track for that. Then we've got to mix that track. Then we've got I'm trying to, in a small way, provide as much work as you can for as many people as you can, while everybody's trying to get back on their feet from it.
Dude, you're such a beautiful man, Steven Taylor. Jesus,
Um,
man, dude, that's really cool. Let's end this on a high note though, because that's just wonderful. Like I can tell you that, like I went from 55 students to like 16 in a week's time. You know what I mean? And you know, I'm now starting to come back. You know, things are starting to stabilize a little bit more, so they're starting to come back. The YouTube channel, did you notice your YouTube views explode in March, April, and May of
Yeah,
last year?
things, people were just home more.
Yeah.
It didn't explode. I wouldn't say. We've had some growth in the past few months, but that's been from very targeted things that we've been working on and doing. But yes, there was definitely an uptick in how many people were watching things and consuming them online. So, but I don't know, kind of, to your point, it's like, there were some negatives to what my dad did for a living, but there were also some positives, and I was exposed to some really great situations, but also hard to understand and kind of situations you kind of throw around in your mind for years. And when you've seen families that can, a family of 14 that can live and eat for 3 months off of $50, things just start to not be that important. How much we're making is just not that important. It's really the more intangibles. It's, are the people around me okay? It really doesn't matter what I can deliver pizzas or whatever. I'm happy. There's a real low baseline for me to base my happiness off of. And I think that comes from being just exposed to people that just didn't have as great an opportunity in life as I've had. So I don't know. I think it's a good time for some reflection. And like you said, a good time to come out and learn how to work harder. And I'm sure you learned new skills for getting new students during that time that you wouldn't have learned before. It
Yeah,
had,
yeah. I had to start doing Skype lessons. So I've picked up a bunch. I have to say, my YouTube channel saved my hind end because I'd never expected. I'm still a very relatively small channel. I only have like 35,000 subs. Have you ever noticed every YouTuber knows exactly how many subs they have? How many subs do you have right now?
and we just hit over 300,000, but that's one of the, that's actually one of the analytics that YouTube cares the least about, which is
I know.
creators care a lot about it and brands care a lot about it, but YouTube could care less
Are
about,
you on an MCN,
what is that?
like a multi-channel network?
Yeah, no. I mean, we get emails from a few of them every week, but no, I've never signed up for that. No,
Okay.
I just prefer to keep everything in house. I haven't seen the benefit that they would bring to the channel.
So that's what I wanted to. That's what I want to end it with. Give us kind of a rundown of what is it, the Stephen Taylor Online Drum School?
Yeah,
like, do you have multiple drum teachers? Are they going to be getting
Stevens
you?
Drum Shed is what it's called, and Shed, SHED, so easy to mispronounce. Yeah, so I've got the Drum Better Daily program, and what that is an online drum school, and in there's hundreds of lessons, and I kind of pride myself for being a much more targeted and very goal specific program. So you don't really come into my program looking to surf around and just be entertained. That's good. I love that. And that's, but for me, I want you plugging in, deciding on the goals, picking the 2 or 3 courses that you need to go in. And then when you email me and you're like, hey, I'm 3 lessons into this and it's kind of hard and I kind of saw this other one I wanted to do. Is it cool if I just go skip over there? I'm like, no, it's actually not cool for you to do that. I want you to finish the stupid course that you started because you told me you're going to do that. And so, I word it kinder. But, for me, that's really the core of where our program is, a little bit more of a personal touch. So whenever they come in, there's over 80 courses that they can get involved in. There's we also, everything that I do for free, the podcast, the Drum Show podcast, I have the YouTube channel. We bring all that stuff into the membership as well. They can view it from there. We have play-alongs. We have a huge community forums. We have member challenges. I do have staff teachers. We have the Tech Talk area where it's all about, we're about to put out a series on drumming in your ears. And it's all about how do we do this thing drumming and maintain and keep our ears safe? How do we listen to music? How do we listen to music on a gig? How do we, some very basic questions with that stuff. We do live Q&As with the students every week. We've started having in some guest artists. So I do the brunt of the teaching. I have another staff teacher, Tim Buell, and he does like all the Vic Firth and Zildjian transcriptions that they do in their videos. He does all of those.
Is he the one that does all that drum corps stuff where they're running the music at the bottom?
No, he doesn't do it's all the transcriptions of the drum set players. He doesn't do
okay.
drum stuff. But Yeah, he's hands down the best transcriptionist there is out there. I'll put that up against anyone. But he's a staff teacher, so he helps me manage the teaching load as far as answering questions from people. And another thing I think that is unique about what we do is everybody that works there is a working drummer. And so Grant Jenkins has a band that he plays with and goes out a few times a year on the road with. He's our community manager. And then Tim Buell has went to Belmont, has a music degree, and he's been in the music industry since then, and has toured with Gloriana and several others. And then there's myself, and so Tim helps me answer questions, field comments, review videos. He does some teaching, but mainly, 95, 96% of the teaching is going to be me on those videos and stuff. So, but it's very much a goal oriented program.
Nice. Well, Stephen Taylor, thank you for coming on here and like, man, you touched me a few times during this conversation. I didn't expect to be touched today. That's really cool. The thing where you were giving those students who you knew that maybe not being able to afford it and allowing them to stay going. We need more of that. We need more of that in this world. That's wonderful. I thank you so much for coming on here. It's an honor. I've been a fan of you for a while. Everyone, if you haven't watched him, of course you have. If you're watching my channel, you've seen Stephen Taylor. So go check out Stephen Taylor on YouTube. And if you want some really good online drum lessons, go check him out there as well. And I'm probably going to get off here and see if I can't get a lesson from Stephen Taylor. So thank you very much, sir. Thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me. I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate what you're doing. I think that there's room for all of us to get out there and make more musicians. I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a thing that I like doing. It's a thing, and I'm glad, and I'm honored I get to do it, and I'm honored that I'm in the same business as you are, Stephen.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, brother. I'll see you.
All right.